What's happening, people? Nobody here yet. Just starting a few minutes before 4:30 or 4:30. So just going to give it a few minutes, probably until 4:30. So hopefully someone joins. And I'll be with you shortly. Okay, let's get this show on the road, people. Got 5 people in the chat at 4:30. What are we saying, guys? What are we saying? Saturday. How have you guys spent first day of your weekend so far? Please don't all answer at once. In the meantime, let's get up some headlines and decide what we're going to talk about. I feel like there's a decent amount to cover. Obviously, January is a busy month. Lucky for us, some good fights. So I'm just getting boxing scene up as we speak. Some things caught my eye already. Boxing News 24. All right. All right. We've lost a couple of people. 3 people in the chat. Who are we? Drop something in. Let's get this party started. All right. Let's have a look at this. So the first fight of note, I guess you could say, because of course we had Tank versus Garcia, with a pretty, I don't want to say decent undercard. To be honest, I didn't really watch the fights, but it was a bit of a who's who of the undercard. So that was interesting. Did videos on Tank and Ennis. Yeah, we have this fight between Stefan, Stephen Shaw. I'm not sure how to pronounce his first name. He's going to be squaring off against F.A. Jagba tonight in Verona. I believe that's a top rank card. Yeah, ESPN top rank. I'm not sure what to make of this one, to be honest. Stefan Shaw, I've seen a bit of him. Not really sure what to make of him though. I think he's got ability, but I'm not exactly expecting him to win this fight, I'll be honest. But if he proves to be a bit of a handful for a Jagba, that wouldn't surprise me. I'm just not sure if he's got enough to capture victory. Damn, it's a quiet live, isn't it? Might have to cut this one short if nobody joins. Stefan Shaw beat Jonathan Rice. That's a decent victory. Jonathan Rice is a decent fighter on his days. I think he's better than his record suggests. Okay. Jonathan Rice has been about, hasn't he? 2 wins over Michael Coffey. Yeah, after the first win, I remember, you probably still find it on my channel, on the community tab. I was picking him to beat Coffey again. Coffey, bit of a strange fighter, to be honest. Up there in age, bit of a weird style too. I'm not sure exactly where he's going in his career. Jonathan Rice, obviously, been in the ring with a Jagba, Dempsey McKean, Makhmudov, Tony Yoka, and of course Stefan Shaw. I don't think I've seen those fights. Johnny Rice, I've only ever seen him against Michael Coffey and highlights from the Jagba fight. But Jagba is a fighter I haven't really spoken about on the channel much, purely because I don't really think that highly of him. I can understand how we could maybe do some things in the division, but he's big, he has power, but he's got a very rigid construct. And when you're in a heavyweight, when you're a heavyweight, most guys are big and have power, but especially these days where a lot of the heavyweights are big, have power, and they're athletic. They have a somewhat dynamic. Jagba I don't feel like he's going to be able to kind of get to a position where he's a cut above the rest. I just don't see it. I'm sure he has the power to beat most heavyweights, probably with one punch, if you let your chin hang out to dry in front of him. But let's be real, that's not going to happen. He's going to have to set up knockouts. And I'm just not sure how well he does that. He looks very deliberate and quite mechanical and stiff, dare I say, robotic, does F.A. Jagba. But who knows? How old is F.A. Jagba? He's 28. And I'm inclined to believe that that is his actual age. So, take it with a pinch of salt, but I guess there is still time for him to improve. Maybe he just needs to getting the right training set up. That being said, who is FA Jagba trained by? Can't exactly remember. Does anybody know in the chat? I feel like it's someone I should know, but I'm just slipping my mind right now. So yeah, I expect a Jagba to win this Saturday. But as I say, I wouldn't be surprised if Stefan Stephen Shaw, I'll just call him Shaw. I wouldn't be surprised if he proves to be a handful. One thing I'm a little bit concerned about regarding Shaw is how much preparation he's had for a fighter, the style and dimensions of a Jagba, because his last fight was Rydell Booker, and Rydell Booker, he's not exactly like what you call it, FA Jagba, not really. But Rydell Booker's he's a decent fighter. He's kind of crafty and wily, but he's just as old as the hills. Bernardo Marquez. Yeah, see, this is what I mean. When you see on Shaw's record fighting the likes of Bernardo Marquez, Marquez is a 6'2" southpaw, and I'm pretty sure all the fights I've seen of Shaw have been against southpaws, which I don't think is going to serve him very well against a Jagba. Before that, so this was a year ago, he fought Joey DeWaco. Joey DeWaco, obviously nothing like a Jagba. He's a 5'10", tank of a man. Nick Davis. See, a lot of these guys I don't even. Yeah, Nick Davis doesn't even say what stance he is. 6'3" 6'3". So, yeah, Stefan Shaw. I think if he was brought along the right way, he may be able to potentially win this fight. But I just don't think that's been the case. He's 2 years older at 30, 6'4", so he's a little bit shorter. 81-inch reach, I think, is probably shorter than a Jagba's. Strangely as well, this guy turned pro January 2014. So he's been a pro a long time, nearly 9 years. Like it'll be 9 years in a few days. So he hasn't really done much. I don't know whether he's suffered from injuries or anything. Oh no, tell a lie. He turned pro in December 2013, so it has been 9 years. It's over 9 years. Looked to be fairly active as well. Fought once in 2013 when he turned pro. That was December. 2014, he fought twice. 2015, he fought 3 times. 2016, twice. 2017, once. 2018, twice. 2019, 3 times. 2020, once in 2021, and then 3 times in 2022. So, he's been active, but only 18 fights in 9 years, and hasn't really fought anyone of note other than Gregory Corbin. I'm not really counting that as a name. Johnny Rice, Joey DeWaco, Rydell Booker, and he's undefeated. So it's not like he's coming up short against these recognizable names, but at least with a Jagba, he's been in with, most recently the likes of Frank Sanchez, who's a good, I think he's a good heavyweight. Don't know if he's going to go all the way, but he's got some ability. The Jagba also been in with Johnny Rice, Razvan Kajanu, Yago Keladze, Michael Walish, Amir Mansour. Curtis Harper. He was just like, nope, ain't nobody got time for that. Left the ring before the fight even started. So, and Jagba's had some crisis moments where he's had to show some heart and like some adversity to go against. Like against Sanchez, he was down. Same again against Kaladze as well, which is a little bit concerning because Kaladze is a cruiserweight, and in that fight, he was hurt himself, and then I believe he caught A Jagba coming in with a right hand and dropped him. Not good sign. Joseph King in the house. How are you doing, my friend? I'm glad that one person's finally dropped something in the chat because I thought I was going to be talking to myself all evening. But yeah, how you doing, Joseph? How's your Saturday going? It's good to have you here. I hope you can stay and talk boxing for a bit. I've pretty much just covered the a Jagba Shaw fight. I anticipate that a Jagba will win, probably by stoppage. Though I won't be surprised if Shaw presents some issues, some hurdles for a Jagba. What else do we have? Just looking at the headlines and boxing scene. Apparently, Dimitri Bivol is backing David Benavidez to beat Caleb Plant. I can understand why. I think I'm picking David Benavidez in that fight. I'm just wondering why that fight is it me, or is this seems like fights in America, especially with PBC fighters, not only there are PBC fighters inactive, but they seem to take ages for the fights to come around. In terms of PBC seem to announce fights that are going to be, 3-4 months down the line. I don't know what's up with that. Maybe it's just exaggerated, but I'm pretty sure that PBC fights seem to have the longest lead up, and yeah, the fighters are inactive as well. But yeah, I feel like I'd pick Benavidez. I've never been impressed by Plant. You guys can even go back and check my pre-fight video for Canelo Alvarez versus Caleb Plant. And I was picking Canelo, and I think I almost got the round spot on because I picked Canelo to stop him. I think maybe round 9 or 10, and I think that fight ended in 11, something like that. So yeah, Plant, yeah, he's flashy, he's athletic, but I think he's definitely one of the fighters who falls into the more flash than actual substance category. Not to say that he's rubbish, he was a world champion, but he's just not elite, I don't think. Joseph King was honestly happy to see you alive tonight. Thank you, Joseph. I appreciate that. Yeah, I like to do these lives somewhat regularly, and there are a lot of topics that I could make videos on. And to be totally honest with you guys, I'd probably, making individual videos on different topics is probably better for the channel in terms of a views perspective and a revenue perspective. But today I just felt like doing a live so I could chat with you guys and have back and forth and engage with my loyal subscribers. So yeah, I'm not sure how long I'm going to go for. Just as long as we're having fun and a good discussion. Got David in the chat. Good to see you, David. Hope you're having a good Saturday. Saying afternoon. Late afternoon. David, are you in the UK or are you elsewhere? Are you abroad? Because here it's coming towards evening, I think it's fair to say. Joseph says, happy for Franklin. Hopefully this shows other boxers that you can actually increase your profile after taking your first L. Yeah, so Joseph, you actually kind of touched on one of the main topics I wanted to expand on. But first, I'm just going to readjust myself, get a comfortable spot. All right. So, yeah, I mean, not from what I've seen, nothing is confirmed yet. The news or potential news being that Jermaine Franklin is Anthony Joshua's next opponent. Nothing's been confirmed, but to be honest, I think there's a likelihood that it will be because Franklin, even before the White fight, they were saying if Franklin wins this, he can potentially be Anthony Joshua's next opponent, and that would be a kind of logical next step because Dylan White was being lined up for a rematch with AJ, but it seems like they don't want to pull that one out the bag too soon. And understandably so, if you're looking at it from the perspective of DAZN, they're not only trying to, I mean, they are trying to rehab Anthony Joshua, but first and foremost, they're trying to make him a commodity again so they can earn money off of it, which is it's just business. And I imagine they want to maximize the revenue from that. So that involves um, how can I say it? Improving Joshua's stock once again, making him, I don't want to say a relevant name again because he's still relevant, but just re-inflating the profile a little bit in the image. But additionally, in doing so, that also pushes back a potential Dylan White fight closer to late spring, summer, where a stadium fight over here in the UK, especially in London, would be a much more viable option. That being said, I have been thinking about not only Joshua's next opponent and of course his trainer, which is another variable which we'll talk about. But what's the? I think it's pretty much a certainty. It's pretty much guaranteed that Joshua's next fight is gonna be on pay-per-view, even though it's on DAZN. It will be a pay-per-view, and I imagine that until every fight Joshua has from now until he retires will probably be still be a pay-per-view. But firstly, are people going to be willing to pay for Joshua after being let down so many times? Because when was the last time Joshua had an exciting performance? Because I was really excited for the Usyk fights, but were they exciting as fights? I'm not sure. There was some tension, there was some good moments in them, but they're not like the fights that Joshua had against, say, the first Dylan White fight, the first Klitschko fight. Um, even the Povetkin fight. The Povetkin fight was a bit different because I knew some people who went to that fight, and they said they were at Wembley Stadium, and when the fight was unfolding, like first round, second round, third round, especially early, they said you could hear a pin drop in that stadium. Yeah, David, I've seen your message. It was your comment. Yeah, it was 2018. It was September 22nd, 2018. Don't ask about how I know the dates. My life pretty much runs off of boxing dates, so I just pinpoint these things. Um, yeah, people were saying that you could hear a pin drop in the stadium because everyone was just kind of on the edge of their seats because Joshua looked quite shaky against Povetkin, which, is Povetkin. Povetkin was a serious operator. And early on, it looked like, maybe Joshua could come unstuck. But yeah, Joshua hasn't had a truly exciting performance in a while. You could say that the finish for the Pulev fight was good, but that fight wasn't entertaining. I didn't find it, and I paid for that fight. So, when you pay for a fight and you're trying to enjoy it to justify the money you've paid. I didn't get that from that fight. That was a bit of a chore to watch. So, are people going to be willing to separate from their money? I know Hatman has said he's not willing to pay for Joshua pay-per-views. So I imagine many people are probably in that same boat. So they're really going to have to stack up the undercards, which they've never really done for Joshua undercards. But then on top of that, DAZN undercards have been thin for a while. I haven't paid for DAZN since, oh boy, since the Parker Chisora rematch, which was that yeah, that was December 2021. So over a year. I can't bring myself to do it. DAZN, the value for money just isn't there. It just isn't. The undercards are typically so paper thin. Hashtag game changed. And I don't want to sound like a hater because I wanted DAZN to succeed. I still want DAZN to succeed because as boxing fans, the more services we have, the more potential for good, entertaining nights of boxing and good cards. But DAZN is just not good enough. David says, yes, depends if it actually gets made. Seems like they switched up after a mixed response to Dempsey. Yeah, that's potential. But one thing that I don't feel like many people are distinguishing because, with the likes of Otto Wallin and Dempsey, I feel like there's maybe a bit of something getting lost in translation, or maybe it's deliberate. I don't know. But these guys obviously want the Joshua fight because now is probably the best time to go in against Joshua because you're probably still going to get a decent payday, but you're also got a decent chance of beating him. His confidence is at rock bottom, and the rest. So they obviously want the fight, and they're trying to chuck their hat into the ring. Pardon the pun. But then are the tabloids the headlines running away with that and saying, okay, this is a potential next step for Joshua, potential next opponent? I don't know. I imagine that they all are being considered, like Dempsey, McKean. I was about to call him Jack Dempsey. No, McKean, Wallin. Oh, that rhymed. And Franklin. I do actually think they are being considered. But then, as you say, David, it's probably which one gets the best response from the public. That's the $1 million question. I just want to say, guys, that I am expecting a knock on the door soon. But if it comes during the live stream, I will just quickly mute myself and see to it. But don't adjust your sets if I go quiet. I'll be back shortly. Next comment. Your captain speaking band. I feel bad for AJ. He got smoked by a pound for pound top three. Could have happened to almost anyone. Yeah, I get what you're saying. I don't want to go as far as saying I feel bad for AJ. I understand his plight though, because I still don't get this whole Anthony Joshua is a protected fighter. If you want to say I don't think he's the best at heavyweight, I think this person beats him, this person beats him, this person beats him. Go ahead, fine. Like, I'd expect you to back it up with some kind of rationale in terms of the stylistic matchup. But I'm not out here trying to defend Anthony Joshua. But to say that he's a protected fighter, it's just untrue. And when you fight the best available opposition, you're going to lose sooner or later. That is just the nature of boxing. So, yeah, a lot of people kind of almost chucking Anthony Joshua under the bus for losing. But then he lost to Ruiz, who Ruiz is no slouch. Yeah, he's a short, fat Mexican, but he's a good fighter. Many people would argue that he should have been undefeated going into that Joshua fight because they had him beating Joseph Parker. I didn't have that. I thought Parker legitimately won that fight. But nevertheless, Ruiz is a good fighter, an experienced fighter with a very particular set of strengths. And then, as you say, he went in against Usyk, who is, he's a generational fighter. I think regardless of whether he beats Fury or not, Usyk has already cemented his name in the history books with what he did at cruiserweight. Because the thing is as well, he's not just, he's a good cruiserweight. He's an exceptional cruiserweight. It's a level above, and he proved that he's a formidable heavyweight at most, at least. So, yeah, I don't get it. Joshua has really been on the fast track, and you sometimes come up short against a better man. It's just the nature of sport and competition. You can't beat everyone. You usually only beat everyone if you manufacture and maneuver your opponent, your career, to fight certain opponents at certain times. And the objective fans don't like that. Only fanboys accept that. Um, okay, David. So you are in the UK. Okay. Yeah, it's dark here. Looking like nighttime already. Um, so you agree about the Pulev fight was clunky? Yeah, the finish was decent, but it was just it wasn't the most exciting fight. Pound for pound, yes, sir. I was waiting for you to come in. So good to have you here, my friend. Hope you're having a good weekend as well. And you can stick here and chew the fat some more. So I like the Franklin fight, but I won't be buying it on pay-per-view. Think Franklin will make it competitive for 6 to 7 rounds, but I expect AJ to get a stoppage in 9 or 10. Okay, that's interesting. I think most people might go a bit earlier in terms of the stoppage, but Franklin proved he's got ability. He certainly proved that because a lot of people say, "Oh yeah, but that's against White and White shot." Yeah, White is definitely shot worn, but I wasn't so concerned by White's performance. I had actually had Dylan White winning that fight, 8 rounds to 4, potentially 2 swing rounds, so it could have been a draw on my card. But I thought White put in a serviceable, decent performance. But that being said, I was still more impressed by Franklin. Um, he, I think he showed that he's a live dog, and maybe, I mean, I'd be very surprised if Franklin became a world champion. I'd probably be surprised if he even fought for a title, but he's a decent fighter, and I think he's going to be in some decent scraps going forward. I certainly don't pick him to beat Joshua though, and like you, I'd struggle to justify paying for that one. You just paying for Anthony Joshua recovery fights that likely have a subpar undercard. Nah, I can think of better ways to spend my money. Um, saying big up to everyone. Yeah, big up the chat as always. Can't believe Spence is considering moving up. That's a duck for me. Yeah, well, it actually has to um, go ahead. This is really just it's. I mean, it's all but confirmed, so it's speculation, but you kind of maybe expecting it. Um, yeah, I'm not impressed by what I've seen from Spence. Someone who started his career so brightly, and he had like a real old school mentality in the way, like he's not a very flashy fighter, Spence, and his personality kind of was a reflection of that as well, where he was just about his business and going in the ring and doing what he does best. No thrills, no extravagance, just getting in there and doing the job. But for the past few years, since he's been a legitimate champion and seen as the best at welterweight, or joint first or second to Crawford, however you want to rate him, I'm not liking this diva attitude. There was that time he was at that press conference and he was talking about cross the street, cross the street. That is, we don't want to hear fighters say that stuff because you're putting a barrier between the fight happening by crossing the street. And I actually wanted to talk about this. I was thinking about doing a video about it, but I just thought, it's kind of old news. But I don't know if you guys remember when the last lot of negotiations between Crawford and Spence were being held, or we were led to believe that they were being held. And Crawford claimed that at the last minute, a third party jumped in and were willing to pay, what was it, 25 million for the Spence Crawford fight to go ahead. And that did seem a little bit odd. And now people saying in the comments, "Oh, that's cap. That's cap. That's not. Who would do that? Which third party would jump into a negotiation and put forward that amount of money?" And I kind of heard them out, and I was like, you know what, that is a little bit fishy. I'm not sure if I buy that from Crawford. But then when you factor in that he was supposedly paid 10 million to fight David Avanesian, who is leagues below Errol Spence in terms of ability and profile, now it doesn't seem so strange. And now it does seem like, okay, if they were willing to pay that amount for Bud to fight Avanesian, 10 mil, maybe it's not so outrageous that this third party did come forward to pay 25 million for the Spence Crawford fight. So, I'm not saying anything's concrete, but that does make me kind of scratch my head and reconsider. So I do believe that I don't think that Spence is scared of Terence Crawford, but I do get the sense that the people around Spence, his handlers, they see him as a he's unified champion, big profile, can sell a lot of tickets in Texas, and they want to kind of milk that for as long as they can. And they'll only make that Terence Crawford fight if Crawford is locked into a long-term contract with PBC, and it becomes an in-house thing where, okay, regardless of who wins, we still have the winner. Because Terence Crawford now, I believe he's essentially a free agent. So, that should erase any politics. But then you factor in that PBC are quite incestuous with their matchmaking. They very rarely let fighters from other networks come onto their network, or for their fighters to go fight elsewhere, which is a shame because it just robs us of seeing a great fight and witnessing boxing history, which is a shame. David says, Valine is my preference. How about you guys? I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure. I from a profile perspective, in terms of, which fighter is the most able or operate at the highest level, I get it. Valine he's got a win over Brazil, been in with Fury, but stylistically, from an entertainment perspective, I'm not sure if that's going to be a good fight. Additionally, would that be the best recovery fight, the best fight on the first road to redemption for Joshua? I'm not sure. I think Joshua would win, but I don't think it would be a good-looking win, if that makes sense. The Conaway asks Garcia versus Davis. I'm picking Davis. I'm not sure that Garcia has the minerals. I do think he has the ability to trouble Davis potentially, especially from a power department. Davis really hasn't been in with many punches. He's been in against Cruz. Cruz, I think, is a decent puncher and a good fighter overall. Other than that, who's Davis been in with who's considered a puncher? No one really. No formidable punchers anyway. And Garcia, for all his faults, that left hook is formidable, I'd say. But for me, there are question marks around Garcia in terms of his mental fortitude. I think he's, a bit of a stereotypical soft millennial. Maybe he'll prove me wrong, but I think even with Davis, he's a bit more experienced. He's got a few more wrinkles to his game, and not to say that he's a perfect fighter. He isn't. He's definitely got things he has to work on, but I feel like I just have more confidence in Davis, in his ability, but also Davis, even though, and I'm sure some of you guys remember pound for pound, I think you were there, Joseph, maybe you too, when a couple of you guys were laughing at when I was calling Gervonta Davis a hood rat and, roadman and that kind of stuff. And he is, this guy hangs around with all kinds of, unsavory characters. But he's got that kind of street mentality where he seems to be in it to win it, because sometimes you get guys with that mentality and they're just bullies. As soon as he gets stuck on them, they fall apart. I'm not sure I think Davis has got some resolve, but we just haven't really seen him in a crisis. So good fight though, and hopefully it answers some questions about both fighters, but I'll be picking Davis, probably for the stoppage. Joseph King, do you agree with Hatman that Joshua should take a layup fight? Franklin does not seem to be an easy night for most. Yeah, I definitely do. Joshua has been in the fast lane for a while. He hasn't really taken a moment to focus on his craft and develop it. I'm sure he's been doing stuff behind the scenes, working with different coaches, improving his technique and his repertoire of skills. But to actually take the time to have slightly easier fights where you can work things out and get confidence boosters and consolidate your team if you're working with a new trainer, Joshua hasn't really had that. Um, I think Franklin is a suitable uh, layup fight, as you put it. I don't see Franklin beating Joshua. Um, Maybe Franklin could pose Joshua some problems, which maybe wouldn't help giving him the confidence boost that he needs. But if that was his next fight, I wouldn't have a problem. I think maybe it should be Franklin. Uh, no, I think it's a suitable fight to have next. I think Joshua gets the win in that. Because you have to factor in the stylistic differences between Joshua and White and how that interacts in a fight with Franklin. So, but yeah, as a whole, I do believe that Joshua needs some more development fights. I called for that. Um, you wouldn't, you guys wouldn't know this because it was before I had my channel, but after the Ruiz loss, the first one, well, the only loss he has to Ruiz, the first Ruiz fight, I said Joshua's going to win this rematch, but he shouldn't take it. He should use this as an opportunity to develop because this is going to be a matter of time until he loses again. And what is he just going to fall into a pattern of immediate rematches? Um, Thankfully, I mean, I say thankfully, if you're thinking about the development of Joshua, the second Usyk loss potentially could be the best thing that ever happened to him because now he's been forced out of the title picture mostly, and he's now he's kind of on his last leg, and he has to go through that development stage, unless he um, jumps the queue and ends up fighting Fury or I don't know, with the winner of Fury or an Usyk or whatever. That would be silly because even though Joshua, I see how he stylistically beats Fury. And I think on his day, Joshua has actually quite a good chance of beating Fury. Um, right now, his confidence is just at an all-time low, and I think Joshua has some psychological issues that lie deeper than what we've seen over the past few months. I think outside of boxing, he's someone who's seems like he's got a lot on his mind and he's dealing with a lot, and that's just how I see it. I feel like Joshua has, I don't want to say personality issues, but I do at the same time. I don't know if it's that deep. I'm just speculating. But Joshua strikes me as someone who has issues that extend beyond boxing, and it's started to show its head in boxing because he's typically quite professional, but I think it's rearing its head now. But hey, I'm not his psychologist. Um, yeah, yeah, pound for pound. Franklin, good footwork, fast hands, quite tough as well. Can take a decent shot. I don't know whether he can absorb elite power, but he's capable. He's a good, competent fighter. I think he just needs momentum. He needs momentum, and he needs to stay potentially in better fighting shape. And TMT, sorry to keep you waiting, my friend. Hello, it's good to have you here. I hope you're having a good Saturday, and I hope you're still in the chat. Otherwise, I've just shouted you out and you're not here. Just bear with me, folks. I'm just going to get a drink because I've been talking a lot. My throat is a little bit dry. And I'm back in the room. All right. Question come through from Joseph. Whose style ages worse over time, Crawford or Spence? Good question. A tough question because I look at both guys and they're both very technically sound. Um, if I am giving an appraisal of both guys, I see Crawford, and he's probably not here now, but if he does watch this, Jay, J98, shout out to you, because he's a Spence guy. Like in that matchup, he's picking Spence, I'm picking Crawford. We keep it respectful. It's no fanboy stuff. It's just how we see the fights go. I see Spence as being quite a basic fighter who is quite effective due to his work rate, his ring presence. He's quite consistent. Um, and I do think that there is a potential for a bit of weight bullying from Spence because he's a massive guy and he's bigger than a lot of his opponents. I don't want to go say like he's a straight weight bully and nothing else. I just think he has a lot of size that works in his favor. But technically, he's very sound, very consistent, but just not very advanced. Whereas I see Crawford. I've got a video on my channel. Um, I think it's just the brilliant boxing of Bud Crawford, and the thumbnail is like boxing's most complete fighter. That's what I've captioned it because I do actually think that Crawford is probably the most complete fighter in boxing today. Not only is he a complete technician, like I think I'd go as far as saying that Crawford is on his way. He's close to boxing mastery in terms of the quality of his technique, but also the application of it. His IQ is just phenomenal. But additionally, I don't think Crawford gets credit for his athleticism because he's a very athletic guy and he's a hard puncher. If you look, Crawford's got great balance, good speed, underrated power. His movement quality and biomechanics is really good. I don't want to say it's perfect because it's very difficult to have. It's probably not even realistic to have perfect biomechanics and technique, but he's close. Like he's super close. Um, so even though that's my assessment of him, I do have to imagine that when Bud starts to fade and he loses some of that athleticism, even though he's a bit more technically advanced, I do imagine it'd probably be to easier to get to him. Whereas with Spence, he's not as athletic. I see, in boxing, you have athletes and then you have guys who are fit, if that makes sense. So the fit guys, they're not necessarily the most naturally athletic, but they've got good fitness, obviously. Good fitness, good work rate. They've trained themselves to get like that. Whereas an athlete, um, a guy who's naturally athletic, he just kind of has those qualities more so, more innately. So I see Crawford as the athlete. I see um, Spence as the hard worker. The hard worker in the gym, very well conditioned. Um, but then Spence also not as technical. So it's really a hard question to be honest. I don't know. I suspect it might be Crawford. I suspect so. Um, I think as Crawford gets older, the athleticism starts to wane a little bit. Even though he's still got the technique, doesn't mean he's necessarily probably going to get blown out of the water, but you know, he will lose some of that edge maybe. Whereas Spence, he's not bolstered so much by athleticism. I don't think he's more of a consistent guy who, yeah, he's got good fitness, but he's a bit more of a workhorse. But that's just my opinion. Um, Teddy Atlas says Crawford has some of the best fighting instincts he's ever seen. Yeah, Crawford is up there. I really think Crawford is something special. I think Spence is a special fighter in his own right, but for me, Crawford is just. I just think he's a level above. Um, Someone like there are some guys, and they have boxing down pat. Not because how can I say, like, they just know boxing. You can tell this is someone who's dedicated themselves to boxing as a science and as an art form rather than just a sport. Um, You know, the Mayweather, like Floyd Mayweather was like that. He was someone who, he was just like a, what would you call it? A boxing textbook, an advanced PhD level uh, official textbook of boxing. Who else? Lomachenko, kind of. Lomachenko, kind of. I'm not sure if Lomachenko is complete a fighter as Terence Crawford or Floyd Mayweather. Definitely a generational, like exceptional level fighter, but Bud and Floyd are just so versatile as well. Um, Mike Tyson, not as versatile, but he was a boxing master. His technique was just impeccable. If you want to know how to throw a punch with power, look no further than Mike Tyson. And I know that kind of, it's not really much of a surprise because you associate punching power with Mike Tyson, but from a biomechanical perspective, just so close to perfect, so close. And I'd even go as far as saying potentially Mike Tyson had perfect technique because he just had a beautiful marriage of offense and defense. Mike Tyson always in position. You know, you look at his fights early on, you never really see Mike Tyson getting caught out, really. You know, he was never, I mean, I'm sure he still took a couple of hits, but he was just always primed and in position to offend his opponent, to defend. It was just phenomenal. Who else? Uh, so many good fighters. So many good fighters. Guys, getting me started. You know, you can. Yeah, exactly, Joseph. And the result of it, that is the result of drilling, consistent, boring, monotonous drills. But guess what? If you do those endless drills, those boring drills, when you're in the heat of the action, you don't have to think twice. It comes naturally. And you know, you always hear Tyson talk about, I mean, he's spoken about it in so many interviews and stuff, about how D'Amato used to say to him, it's good, but it's not perfect. We need to get perfect. So do it again, do it again. That is the key to developing any skill, especially athletic skill, where you're moving your body. Because that repetition is just, you know, you're drilling it into your body to become a reflex almost. So you don't have to spend time and kind of internal energy thinking about the quality of your technique. All you're doing is you've got your eyes on your opponent and you're reacting to the stimulus that they provide, be it, you know, a positional change, offense, any kind of maneuver. You don't have to think about your technique. You just think about the application of it, if that makes sense. So yeah, Tyson, that's it. And people want to go into the boxing gym, get the heaviest bag, and throw combinations like Mike Tyson. It's only half the battle because it's like people want to freestyle, but boxing doesn't work like that. You know, a lot of boxing, and people don't realize this. A lot of a lot of boxing is doing boring things over and over and over and over again. But then you begin to sequence it to the point where, okay, I start off with one particular movement and I get that really polished, you know, to a certain degree. You don't have to master one thing before you move on to the next, but you want a good degree of proficiency. Then you try something else. And I'm, you know, it's difficult for me to say exactly, but then before you know it, you have building blocks and you can start to mix and match them. And before you know it, you're boxing. It sounds like really kind of jumbled and convoluted, but basically you practice, loads of different things, put them together. There you go. Obviously, it takes more than that. You actually have the intangibles like heart, chin, determination, all that kind of stuff. But in terms of technique, you got to drill. You got to do those boring drills day in, day out. What was the quote that Bruce Lee said? I fear the man who's practiced one kick 10,000 times than the man who's practiced 10,000 kicks once. There you go. Yeah, drill it so hard, drill it so often that you couldn't get it wrong even if you tried. There you go. There you go. But also have options as well. You know, it'd be easy to fall into the rut of only having one way of doing particular techniques. And what does that provide? It's an opportunity because it becomes a pattern, and a pattern can be exploited by opponents. So you still need to have some kind of mindfulness. You can't fully rely on autopilot, but that really comes down to the repertoire you have and your application of a particular technique. But we're getting quite technical, aren't we? Right, I'm just gonna have another sip of water, guys. All right. Good chat, guys. Good chat. Probably going to go for another few minutes. I don't think this is going to be the longest one, but let's maybe round it up to like an hour or something. So we haven't even spoken about Eubank versus Smith or Beterbiev versus Yarde. I don't think we don't have to touch on these too heavy because I'm going to do videos about them. Eubank versus Smith next week, and then Beterbiev versus Yarde after that. But those are good fights. I'm looking forward to those, especially Beterbiev versus Yarde. Very much looking forward to that one. Joseph asks, from a stylistic perspective, which professional fighter will be the biggest nightmare matchup against Outmatch? So, oh boy, I'm trying to think what kind of style I always used to struggle with. You know, I was never someone who struggled with Southpaws. That was never really an issue for me. Um, you know, but I think it came from the fact that my coach was a very good coach, and he was an active fighter at the time, and he was a switch hitter, so he could fight fluently as either southpaw or orthodox, and you know, it was, you know, really something to be admired. His ability. It's just a shame his career didn't pick up. So from an early start in boxing, I had a lot of sparring with both orthodox and southpaw opponents. Um, and it's really just an experience thing, you know. There's this whole thing about the southpaw advantage. It's a myth, largely. Like, you can do everything a southpaw can do. The only thing is a southpaw has had more practice at doing it to orthodox fighters. The real kicker is when you have two southpaws squaring off, and yeah, that's awkward. That's awkward. Um, Southpaw versus Southpaw matchups, very strange experience. You know, if you're used to fighting Orthodox and Orthodox, Orthodox Southpaw, but Southpaw and Southpaw, ugh. You know, a lot of the guys who I started boxing with, we all had the same coach, so we all kind of developed switch hitting abilities. And our spars used to be very dynamic, where it'd be okay, orthodox and orthodox, orthodox and southpaw, southpaw and southpaw. And whenever it got to that, it was always like, this doesn't feel right. This feels weird. But it's just because it's so rare. But you know, with practice it comes. You know, I don't know. Uh, I always found it quite nerve wracking to go up against guys who were shorter. Um, you know, I don't know. There's something a bit uneasy about a short guy coming up to you, you know, with his chin tucked, because then you have um, virtually no target almost, because he's too low for you to really get off any meaningful body shots without putting yourself at risk. But additionally, if a shorter fighter gets into your your range, unless you really know how to shorten your shots off and redirect an opponent, it can end, it can go wrong. Um, uh, but then on the flip side, taller guys who keep you at range, I feel like those are usually the ones where if you're the shorter guy, you have to work so much harder because you're overcoming a height advantage, you're overcoming a reach advantage. And if they're quicker than you, boy, you got your work cut out. Your ability to cut off the ring is going to have to be on point. But not only doing that, you have to be very wary of how far their range extends, because sometimes you might be stepping into range without realizing it. And that's something that many people who begin boxing, they don't realize. So it's easy to catch them out. As soon as they step into range, um, they're completely oblivious that they're about to get hit. And if you want to see just how potent that is, watch Sergey Kovalev's fights. I kid you not, Sergey Kovalev, for all his faults as a person, I'm aware that he's not the most, he's quite an unsavory individual. As a fighter, and specifically a long range boxer, Sergey Kovalev is among the best. And he mastered the timing, how the ability to time a fighter just as they step into range. Just as soon as that front heel touches the canvas, bang, he's timing you. You can see a prime example of this against Anthony Yarde. He was timing Yarde the whole fight on that same timing, and Yarde could never adjust. Kovalev is too sharp. If you're in against a fighter like that, it's a hard night, because not only do you have to stay in front of them and cut off the ring, but you have to move your head. You need to have your hands in an appropriate place. You have to control so many variables, and you could argue that you have to do that in boxing anyway to have success. You have to control the variables. You need to control the opponent. But it's hard to do when you're in against someone who moves well, is tall, and has longer reach and understanding of range as well. Yeah. So that being said, if I was to pin that on a particular fighter, like a fighter who I've watched over the years and thought, you know what, I don't know if I could beat this guy. I'd try. I'd certainly try. Probably be Lerone Richards. And I understand he's probably not the best fighter. He's not the most high profile, but stylistically, I don't know, man. Like that's a hard man to beat. Who else? Hmm. I can't think of any right now. But yeah, I'll come back to you. But I'd say Lerone Richards, that kind of style, athletic, tall, long arms, moves well, decent boxing brain, and someone who's not really interested in engaging too. Not to say that he's going to run, but he understands where his advantages lie, and he's not going to give you anything to work with. We've got Jordan Johnson. What's up, bro? Just got here. Hope you're doing well. Got Arthur by stoppage, probably later in that fight. Yeah, I agree. As I say, I'm going to touch on this in a couple of weeks' time. Do a pre-fight video. But yeah, I agree with that. We're going to go for a little bit longer, I think, Jordan. So I hope you're sticking around just to finish off this chat. And thanks for tuning in, as always. We've got the one, the only Chris Andre in the house. Asks, how am I? I'm very good. Thanks, Chris. I'm a little bit knackered. I had a 3-hour Olympic lifting workshop today as part of one of the internship I'm on. So and I went to the gym afterwards. So I'm spent for the day, but you know what? It's good, productive Saturday. I hope you're doing well as well. Got anything interesting lined up this weekend, Chris? Yeah, two Southpaws, always fascinating to me to watch. They often look confused with each other. Yeah. Um, it's it's strange. It's strange. I'm trying to think. I've seen quite a bit of Southpaw versus Southpaw sparring in the days. People want to try new things out in sparring. Okay, how well do I fight in the other stance against the same stance? Um, and typically, when you get, say, one person who's normally orthodox against someone who's a southpaw naturally, when that orthodox turns southpaw, it generally ends um, not very well. Because you've got a southpaw who's much more natural throwing the left hand compared to an orthodox fighter who's now fighting in southpaw, doesn't really understand how to apply the right jab that well, and just gets timed over the top and floored. I've seen that so many times. Joseph King, the jab does not seem as effective against southpaw. It really just depends how you apply it. I can understand why people find it a bit of a confusing, but your one thing that I always realized is when people are in when you have a southpaw orthodox matchup, the orthodox fighter, they typically understand that they have to meet and control the lead hand of the southpaw, but that never carries over to orthodox matchups. They'll do it against the southpaw, but not an orthodox, um, which is an invaluable skill. You have to control the hands and the gloves of your opponent. It makes boxing a lot easier, trust me, rather than just trying to walk into range without layering the distance without anything. And against the southpaw, you have a little bit. It's really about the placement, and that's going to come down to your position and your location, if that makes sense. It can be a little bit difficult to line up, but at the same time, it I find it to be a bit more natural in the sense that, okay, our lead hands are closer, so they may clash, but at the same time, you have a bit more contact with the opponent, and by doing that, you can kind of manipulate where their glove goes. You can pull it down, fire the jab over the top, do the same thing, knock it up, and then um, I guess shoot the jab underwards. Although they could potentially bring that arm back down on top of yours, pulling yours down, and it becomes a chess match. Yeah, it's the jab. What I should have said is it really depends which jab you're talking about. So if you're an orthodox, you have two jabs. At least in my philosophy of boxing, the way I was taught, you have jabs and crosses, and what defines those is where the weight is. So if I have the weight in my right leg as an orthodox, I'm unloading the left side. So therefore, I now have a left jab. If I bring my weight forward to the left leg, so the front half of my stance, I can now turn it backwards and have a left cross. Additionally, I can keep my weight on the left leg at the front of my stance and throw my right hand from there, have a right jab, or I can have the traditional right cross, which is bringing the weight from the back half of your stance to the front half. So right leg to left leg. Once again, Sergey Kovalev does this very well. The perfect way of multiplying your arsenal by having a left jab, left cross, right jab, right cross. And that applies well against uh, southpaws in particular, because you can learn to get around their lead hands, which is, it's a little bit different because then you have the lead foot dominance, but that's just another variable. And if you've trained it enough, it really becomes second nature because you just understand, right? You can kind of see their foot in your peripheral vision. You have to work around it, but at the same time, you need to just focus on the head, focus on the lead glove and the rear glove. Yeah, maybe that's one for a study or something. We'll see. Uh, Joseph King, what will you say the best leg workouts are for a boxer with dodgy knees? Dodgy knees. That's a very general uh, category of injury. Dodgy knees, but first and foremost, I'd advise you to address what exactly the issue is with the knee, purely because uh, it could be something that maybe could be remedied, and therefore you don't necessarily need workarounds. You might just need adjustments. But assuming that you know what the problem is and it's it's here to stay, there's not really much chance of you reversing it. You really just want to address. You want to bring in movement patterns that don't aggravate it. Because that it seems like simple advice, but a lot of people feel like, oh, I need no pain, no gain. No, um, pain equals no gain. It's just avoid pain. Okay, it doesn't make you macho. It's not big. It's not tough. It's not smart. It's silly. So avoid pain because you're already. I don't understand why people chase pain or like willing to work for it because you're already exerting yourself by you know lifting heavy weights or really pushing your capacities to the limit. The last thing you need to do is do it and be in pain. That just doesn't make any sense. Um, but in term that and that could be anything in terms of identifying exercises that you can do um, that don't aggravate your knees. Um, when you say leg workouts, I'm going to assume you mean resistance training. But correct me if I'm wrong, because you say for a boxer with dodgy knees, a boxer needs to cover a lot of bases. You need the strength, you need the explosiveness, but you also need the aerobic and the kind of anaerobic conditioning. So, uh, it's you can't really. The thing is with legs, there aren't as many kind of motions you can or movements you can carry out. You really kind of have squatting, um, and then extending, so hip and knee extension. You have some smaller ones, but they're not really significant in boxing. They're going to be more uh, auxiliary exercises to maintain balance and basically prevent injury, that kind of stuff. So it's a difficult question, and all I can really say is the dreaded answer, and that's it depends. Um, okay, so a general workout that covers everything. So yeah, look, to be honest, you can't really go wrong with a squat. I think squats are essential because they are a base fundamental movement pattern. Many people kind of like they just say, "Oh no, not squats." Look, there are so many variations of squats. You have back squats, you have front squats, and you even have variations of those. Like I hate back squatting, so I don't do it. And if I ever do, I try and use like a safety bar where I don't have to reach my hands behind my back. Some kind of freak who really likes front squats, even though front squats are not universally hated, but people aren't keen on them because they can't load them as heavy. Um, and uh, I can do front squats with a decent amount of weight. Like I can do my body weight on the front squat for reps and not feel um, anything in my lower back. So I do that, Whereas if it's a back squat, I'm going to feel a little bit of weakness, some cracking in my lumbar spine. Not great. Going to be a bit tired afterwards. No, front squats for me. Bang those out all day. Um, you also have single leg squats, so you can do lunge variations. It's kind of the squat family. You can do Bulgarian split squats, which are disgusting. I look challenge to you guys. Do a Bulgarian split squat. If you don't know what it is, Google it. It's very simple. It's basically a stationary lunge with your rear foot. So the assisting foot is on a raised surface, usually about knee height, maybe mid thigh if you're a real sadist. Um, get a weight, pump that up to like, I don't know, the 15 reps for a few sets. You'll wish that you never tuned into this live stream because those are disgusting, but very effective leg workout that you can do with not very much weight, because it's a very humbling exercise. You could take that step further by having the both legs on an elevation, but there's clearance so that your knee can go to the floor of the knee of your non-working leg. Super stretch in the leg muscles, just is going to really strengthen the tissues, potentially do good things for um, your knee joint. But I say that with an asterisk, because it depends. Jumping squats, as you say, although jumping squats inherently have a bit more impact, even though you're not probably loading them anywhere as heavy. What else? Yeah, there are so many variations you can go for. Keep it balanced. I'd say have some kind of extension. So that would be deadlift variations. You got Romanian deadlifts, stiff-legged deadlifts, conventional deadlifts. I can't say deadlift for some reason tonight. Once again, I don't like doing conventional deadlift. It really tires my back out. What do I do instead? Stiff-legged deadlifts. I'm a very glute and hamstring dominant kind of guy. So, that works for me. So I can do heavy front squats for, like I say, relatively heavy, because it's, we're all different strength levels. Heavy stiff-legged deadlifts, and I feel nothing in my lower back. Whereas if I was to do barbell back squats and conventional deadlift, forget it. I'm not standing up tomorrow. You know, that's just the nature of it. So yeah, there's so many variations. I hope that answers your question. Um, Squat variation, deadlift variation. Don't forget your calf raises. Calves are a very important muscle. You want to fortify that Achilles tendon, especially if you're doing boxing. Um, doesn't have to be much. A few sets of calf raises in between. A lot of people keep calf raises to the end and don't end up doing them and wonder why they've got bloody what's French fry calves and stick legs. Do your calf raises, just put them in between the sets of your squats and deadlifts, and that's it. You get that volume in. Maybe do some hip stuff as well. I'm assuming that you don't really need to do any mobility work, but most people typically do because they sit down a lot. But endless variations. Yeah, maybe one day I'll do a strength and conditioning for boxing episode, because I've already done a video where I spoke generally about the application of strength and conditioning in boxing, but that was just very general, kind of addressing some misconceptions about the topic. But if that's something that you guys want or would get some kind of value from, let me know. Jordan, one type of training Arthur does, it gives him wicked strength. Not saying genetics don't matter, but like his push-ups, he keeps constant tension on those muscles and slams his fist into the ground. Yeah, that's a very I can't say I'd recommend that for most people, but I feel like I can kind of decipher the benefit of it. So if you imagine that he's doing plyometric push-ups where he's getting clearance from the ground, landing on his knuckles, there's a degree of stiffness that he's developing in the upper body, which kind of carries over to the impact of hitting something. So yeah, that I feel like that's what I interpret those are good for. However, I feel like there are maybe better ways of developing that, such as just hitting the heavy bag. Um, I'm not sure if the risk reward is really worth it for most people, because Artur Beterbiev, let's not forget, he's a monster. So he's clearly very robust, and I'm sure he's taken a decent amount of time uh, to work up to that. But yeah, I feel like that's probably what the benefit is that he gains from that. You talk about here. My theory is he therefore creates micro tears in muscles and tendons. Well, yeah, that's what resistance training does of any kind, really. You're applying a force to those tissues, creates some kind of damage, which um, then your body super compensates. Then there are some structural adaptations that allow you to transmit force and produce force better, for lack of a better term. So yeah, that's really the case for all resistance training, but particularly where you're landing. You know, if you do any kind of jump training, you can really train the stiffness of your ankles in particular. So you're not only learning to produce force to leave the ground, but you're learning to absorb force, which you can largely break sports down. You know, in if you wanted to really simplify sports, a lot of the time it's just a matter of producing force and absorbing it in just different movements in different forms. So yeah, you're pretty much spot on, Jordan. Um, okay. Oh, we had G-Man. I've only just got to your comment. It's good to have you here. Hope you're doing well, G-Man. Um, hope all is well. You doing anything tonight? Anything interesting this Saturday? All right. Okay. Yeah, Joseph saying that you'd love an S&C video for boxing. I'd I'll work on it. I'll start thinking of some things, and because I'd like it to be valuable and have a degree of specificity. So maybe even if I can get footage of current high level fighters, or maybe even fights of the past doing S&C or S&C type stuff, and we can break it down and analyze it and kind of give you my 2 cents, and you can make of that what you will. Something like that. I'll definitely consider. Um, so it's a good idea for the future. All right, people. I think it's coming up to 10:06. We've been going for like an hour and 20 minutes. I'm going to bring this one to a close shortly. So we've had a good talk, guys. As always, the time has flown by. Do we have any more questions? Any more topics we want to finish up on? But as I say, I'm going to start bringing this one to a close now if we don't. Okay. I'm going to assume that you guys are forever holding your peace. And I think that is a good note to finish on. So thank you guys for tuning in with me as always, and giving up your time to spend it with me. Lonely old outmatch. But nevertheless, guys, thank you. And I hope you have a good weekend. And I'm not gonna make any jokes, because the last time I made a joke uh, about operating automobiles after consuming particular uh, substances, and so the advertising revenue on that one got limited. So I'm just going to say goodbye. Thank you guys, and I'll catch you on the next one.